Welcome to session four. Session four of our Creating Your Acoustic Edge, our Unlocking Sales Opportunity. So this is just a little series that we're doing. There's going to be 12 total sessions where we're just providing some of the knowledge and best practices that we've learned over the last several years. And Brock has done some extensive research with some of the top performers and interviewed them, talking to them about what helps them be successful. And so we are, we created this to give you guys the tools that you need to be successful. By no means do we feel like this is you have to do everything we say here. Everybody's style is always going to be, unique and their own, and that's what makes them successful. So it's kind of all part. Take what is good and what resonates with it and use it and run with it. So there's two sides to everything. One is the best practices. That's where we're going to use a lot of Brock's research and conversations with some of the top performers that we have. And the other piece is the technical advantage. That's where we're going to use a lot of industry knowledge and the things that you always come to me for in the consults, right? So want to start by kind of recapping our last session about wood. We gave you guys some challenges, some takeaways, and some things that we asked you to go around and do. And so just curious if anybody wants to share, did anyone find a project that has millwork and they tried to start a conversation about acoustics? And even if you just throw your hand up, we're not going to make you share your experience, but I'd love to know if anybody has been able to take what we talked about and kind of use it already. Okay. Well, that's okay. And just as a reminder, these are things that we hope will help you guys drive more business. So the other thing that we challenged you with was to find an architect designer and have a conversation about sequencing and bring one of the experts in to help have that conversation. So just a reminder, want to make sure that we're using this stuff as we move forward. So today's session is staying in the spec and how we help protect ourselves from being value engineered.
Daniel, this is Jill. Can I interrupt? April is having a hard time. She says she's waiting to be let in. Can you guys check to see if she is, please? Sorry. I put it in the chat, but I don't know if you guys saw it. Sorry.
Yeah, so we don't have April waiting. We had Elsa waiting, but we don't see her waiting.
Do you have a 443? I think it's 443. Jen, can you? Yeah, it's a 443 number.
Yeah, we don't have anything that's waiting to be in for us to admit it.
Okay, I'll let her know. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. But I'll keep monitoring that. Make sure that we're letting everybody in.
So the session that we did, not this last session, which was wood, but the session before that was on trust and positioning, right? So that's how to kind of start having that conversation, become that person that your customers can come to in times of need. The second biggest factor of that through my conversations was, let's say you create that trust or you start to create that trust. What happens over the next 9 months? And the industry is changing and the architect's perception of us is changing. And there's a few best practices that we're able to uncover in our conversations that are referenced between all 6 folks that I talked to. So heading to the first slide, let's just set the stage of what this session is going to be about, staying in the spec. Most specs are lost quietly. No one calls you and says, hey, you're about 10 seconds from being fully removed from this project. What happens is you learn about it maybe a year later and you sit there and go, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be, this building and the space was supposed to be being built out right now. I never heard anything about that. So it's not like we learned from the last session. It's rarely because of the product is a worse product, or it's something that you don't have to compete with, or that your price is too high, or any of those kind of more competitive things. What our customers would tell us is that we've quote unquote disappeared, right? We didn't disappear. We know that for a fact. We use Salesforce as our management platform. I get to see different reps that we have here, how often they reach out and how little they actually give a response back, which is certainly one of the challenges. But the perception from the architect is that we slowly kind of faded away or disappeared from that project. We weren't necessarily useful. We weren't providing the value in the moment that our specifiers are looking for. And that value changes depending on where you are at in that 9-month period, from maybe your first conversation to product just got landed on site and they're about to be installing it. A lot of times it just has to do with being responsive. Again, something we talked about last session. We weren't fast enough. We weren't in the moment enough to answer questions, quell fears, like all of that kind of stuff, or just be a supportive role there next to them to help them problem solve. And the last one is we weren't involved, and we'll talk about what that means. And that's a trend that's happening in the industry right now. So, one, where projects quietly lose momentum. We're going to talk about those areas in the process. That next one down, I kind of call this one, number 3 down, how top reps stay involved. This is what I call almost like political capital. What's your equity in that relationship and in that project? Why are specs disappearing? Going back up to number 2. Number 4, from the interviews I learned, it's easy to think, well, I got the meeting and I'm in, but the reality of it is you generated interest and you generated a little bit of momentum. You got maybe the wheels turning, but really that's when the real work starts, to try to get that person inspired and start imagining your products in their spaces and what impact it's going to have on the occupants of that space. That's when actually the hard work starts, not where the hard work ends. And then the last one, visibility, responsiveness, and support builds long-term trust, and then what that trust does to your business. This is a picture that we had shared last session, in Daniel's last session. This is just a different view of it. This product illustrates a bunch of kind of cool talking points that we're going to go through on this slide. So staying involved matters more right now than it did in the past. The needs of our specifiers, our interior designers, whoever we're working with, they are shifting. And the expectations that they have of you are changing. And where we first started, at least here on this side in Loveland, started to see this develop was during COVID. And interior designers were having to become like virologists and bacteria specialists, and they had to know how to specify copper materials on door handles because it was killing viruses, and what HVAC they were going to do to clean the air. And they had no kind of business, but that's what they were responsible for. We also started to see this happen before then, and it was a fallout from the 2008 kind of economic environment. And a lot of your mid-level architects were getting exited. And what the partners did was task either themselves or, more commonly, their early stage architects to become specifiers and product experts. And where this is going is that everybody in an architecture firm was taking on more work than they were comfortable with, if you just want to say it like that. So then 5 years later, what started to happen from 2002 to 2005 to now, what we're in the middle of, 2020 to 2025 is what we're in the middle of now, is they are offloading some of the stuff that they are responsible for onto the manufacturers. And the manufacturers that are able to help them with that are the ones that are winning in the field. So responsibility is shifting to the manufacturer. Another big thing that's happened, and this is a perfect example there to your right, that image of Jack's restaurant, is acoustics is becoming part of the design, not the finish. You know, acoustics is in Division 9, and you would get to pick out some of your wood species and what fabric is going to be on all of those chairs that you see there along the window, and the business owners picking out which alcohol vendors he's going to stock the bar with. And then it's like, oh, let's throw some acoustics in there because this is going to be a really loud environment. And Danny will talk about this here in a second, but those support structures that you see going through the space there, those are acoustic. So we were involved from the very first idea generation of what this space was going to be, all the way to the finish of it. And then the last one, your clients are starting to care more about the experience and the outcome and what's happening in the space than they are just pure numbers. If you look at greenwashing and safety certifications and sustainability and carbon footprint and all of those kind of different things that people talk about, there are ways that manufacturers are creatively getting around those sorts of things. And so at the end of the day, the architects and your specifiers just want to know that the problem is being solved. They care less about a 0.5 or 0.85 NRC and a 0.7 NRC than the fact is, can you assure me that it's going to solve the problem? And so I think those are some 3 interesting takeaways to think about as we go through the next few slides.
With this particular project, there's a, Brock alluded to it. We were involved from the beginning, and we weren't something that's being added in after the fact. So this ceiling is all felt, with the exception of this section right here. Those are wood planks, but everything else on that ceiling is felt. And what's behind that felt is unfinished material. They didn't finish this ceiling out. They finished it with the felt. So there's no paint, there's no primer, there's no extra sanding that they did on the ceiling when they drywalled that out. They just put the drywall up, and then our stuff went right over the top. And it became not just an aesthetic that gets added after the fact, it became part of their design. They didn't finish it with anything else and then add acoustics in. They used acoustics to truly finish off the construction of the space. And so all of these beams are felt beams that were cut and built here and then assembled and installed on site. And then all the white that you see is all felt as well. And so what we were able to do with this is they came in with this idea of hey, we need to add acoustics. And so they came to us and said, hey, how do you add acoustics? And we went through and did our acoustic report and told them how much they needed. And they're like, we really want that much, but we can't afford that much. How do we make this less expensive? And so we went through and we're like, well, you can save money if you do these things. And if you use acoustics as the finish, if you use acoustics as finishing off the construction of the material instead of adding it in, they save money by having to have that drywall ceiling primed, sanded, primed, and painted, right? They didn't have to do that. They could just get the drywall up. Now our felt panels are going in, and you can't even tell when you're in this space that there's seams and that's just panels put together. It provides acoustic value. All those things come into play, and they didn't have to do as much work finishing it off before they added in the acoustics, right? And so we helped them change their intent and their design, not just the finished design, but the overall design of the space with acoustics. There's another portion of this particular project where they wanted to cover up the sprinklers that were basically, there was a sprinkler pipe running through one of the sections that they wanted to cover up somehow. And instead of building out boxes and fake beams around that, we used our felt to build beams that the sprinklers were then hidden into, right? So we went through and we did some things with the products that we have to help them finish the space and actually finish the construction of it with acoustics instead of finishing out. And now we're going to add acoustics back in. So that's what he meant by getting involved early and really designing with the acoustics instead of adding it in after the fact, making it integral to the finish of the space, right? We have another project where we're using wood acoustics that they aren't putting chipboard on top of their studs. They're using aluminum metal framing and they're putting C-bar directly to that. And then our panels are going in and being the wall, right? They're gonna be butt jointed and go, cover the entire wall, floor to ceiling. And that's one of the ways they're saving money. Like, we don't have to come in and chipboard and put all this in. We're just going to attach the Z-bar directly to the framing and use your panels as our wall system. So doing things like that is how you get stickier in the spec. Not a lot of the other manufacturers are going to have systems readily available for that. They're going to say, hey, you got to finish it off with drywall. You got to have this type of a finish, whatever it might be. And so it makes it harder to value engineer yourself out of, down the line when the contractor is trying to save money to put more in their own pockets, or save the project.
And these are trends. So not everyone you talk to is going to be doing these three things or any of these things. And one of the things that we found, and I haven't looked recently, but a couple of years ago, roughly 50% of our business was kind of post-occupancy. Somebody else moves into that space and they're maybe using it for a different function, and we have to go in there and provide acoustics, or the previous tenant didn't do it correctly or something like that. So we totally get that. And so you're not going to be a part of the kind of the building process. And, maybe only 50% of the 50% are going to do any one of these three things, but these are definitely the trends that are happening in the industry. And if they're not thinking about that way yet, it's also good for you because it can be your opportunity to help guide that conversation, because you want to become a valuable part of their team, not just a provider of wall covering or acoustics or anything else you kind of have in your quiver. So the illusion versus the reality, again, you start hot and heavy, you get excited, you get that early win of them being interested in what you're offering, and that matches actually what they're going through on their journey as well. But really, you didn't win much. You just started kind of in that danger zone. And designers have so many more things that they're working on. They're not just working on acoustics, right? They have tons of other divisions, tons of other materials, tons of other responsibilities. So their priorities are constantly shifting. The intent of the space is shifting. You have other people getting involved. So you have project managers or other colleagues or partners or contractors or install. You have all these different people who are going to help muddy the waters. And then, of course, you have resource pressures, time and money. And so if you don't stay kind of swimming with them and being valuable to them, you're not going to make it through the entire process. So the headline there, projects don't stay still. And if you're not intimately involved, something else will fill that void for them, fill that priority for them. Stay useful, stay involved. I wanted in this session to point out some specific quotes that we got through the 9 hours worth of interviews that we did, right? This isn't hypothetical. We're not inventing this stuff. And so, in your little national colored section there to the right, we have some quotes, but stay useful, stay involved, be proactive, right? Follow up before you're asked, stay connected, bring real value after the meeting, stay responsive. If you only bring kind of specs to the equation, it's very easy to remove you. But if you're actually solving problems, engaged in the project, and you are passionate about the success of the person that you're working with, you're now tied to that project. And that's much harder to engineer out. So I'm going to read these quotes. At the end of the day, I got back to basics. I think follow-up is the thing that people might skip. Show up, be present, let people know you're there, and you do what you say you're going to do. And both of these quotes were kind of reflecting on the first year of working with Mode and then the second year working with Mode. And it was that second year that these folks that I talked to started to really take off. So you can see kind of in that quote that, you know, they were kind of getting away from what was making them successful prior. I started focusing on working on the business, bigger footprint, new clients, other materials, instead of in the business, and that was a mistake. So again, how do we find new clients? What other little smaller towns can I go into and uncover different architecture places? What other happy hours can I do? Who else can I train? Should I be a manager? What other materials or manufacturers should I go out there and find to add to my portfolio? And their numbers, their business really started to suffer by doing that. So, you know, this persistence is not about being annoying and just checking in every 30 days. Hey, hope you're well. How's everything going? Kind of end up. That's so much easier for an architect just to roll through in their email or not return that phone call. But, you know, you want to stay in the know with what's happening with the project, with the entire project. And what that person that you're talking to, what their outlook is like. What are they feeling? What are their emotions? What are their challenges? What are their successes throughout that 9-month specification period? So if you are like the other folks that I just mentioned, you know, how do you adapt your process to fit what we're seeing here for some of the successful folks that I talked to? You need to help shape it as a solution and focus on the results. We're going to talk a lot about this, but it is about results and about outcomes. It's not about numbers or products. The goal is to get invited to be a part of their design process, that they call you when they're working on something. Or I mentioned before, they call you when you're not even specified on the project because they know that you're going to be there for them and help them through any questions that they have. So connect the decisions that they're making to the human outcomes, and the human outcomes for both the people in the space, and you want to think about the architects. How are you making their life easier by being a part of it? Right? That's what community is about, right? We all get together and form these strong relationships because we're stronger together. To the quotes. Every time I meet with someone, I want to bring something useful. I can't just show up and be fluff and be fun. I want them to walk away feeling like I actually helped. The more you're seen, the luckier you get. You can't just rely on the same relationships forever. You have to stay visible, keep showing up, and keep reminding people you are a resource. So again, you'll see lots of similarities in these presentations, right? You'll see similarities inside of Dan's presentations. You'll see similarities inside of my presentations across them. But what we're doing with these sessions is creating a framework. It's creating a common language between Loveland and between Little Rock, between your colleagues, between Dan and I, so that if somebody's having a challenge that you work with or somebody's having a success that you work with, you now have this shared information that you can frame your conversations around. So we're not trying to bore you by going back to the same things over and over again, but it just helps solidify to make those conversations easier and more natural to have as we continue to talk about these same things. So we have this squiggly, wormy line going through left to right. We have another horizontal straight line, vertical dotted line. What's it all mean? A few years ago, Dan, I, and a few other people, we mapped the emotional journey of the different people kind of in our orbit. And this is a version of that. This is what the architect goes through over that, call it 9-month period. that line going across the middle, left to right, horizontally, think of that as the break point. So above that, they are trusting, they're confident, they're excited. And below that, they are fearful and they are worried and they're stressed out. And so through their journey, they start pretty high and they reach this high point very early in the journey. And a lot of times, this is that first conversation that you have with them. You know, you finish a 15-minute conversation and you say, yeah, I would love to know kind of what projects you're working on right now that I could be of help with. Is there anything, any questions that you have that I can assist with, right? And they say, oh, we kind of have this project. You start talking about products. That's kind of that high point. And really, they stay pretty happy, let's call it for the next 3 months, and they slowly fall into this slump, right? That's the trough. And it's funny because Daniel and I just did a leadership training session, and they use this exact same map for our training leadership session. And they have the left area as forming. Then they have the storm, which is that trough. And then you're rising out of that trough, and you're starting to normalize. And then you get to perform in that top right-hand corner. So we need to constantly be a resource for our customers. I'd love to throw a question out there to the crowd. So either take yourself off mute or answer in the chat. Maybe Daniel can look at it. But where should we do these kind of 6 best practices of asking questions, identifying their challenges and gaps, bring in support when needed, whatever that looks like? It could be a CEU, it could be a colleague. Following up fast, staying helpful throughout that process, and keep repeating this, right? It's cyclical and it happens over and over again. But where's that next moment that we think we'd provide the most value to our customers? Daniel, what do you think?
So the tough part is what that trough really represents. They've done their CDs and it's gone out to bid, and now it's in the hands of other people and they're waiting. And the first parts of the construction are slow and there's not a lot of change, not a lot that they need to do, but they're fearful because now this is out to bid and I got to make sure everything's on point, everything's under budget, all that kind of stuff. And as you get towards the end is when, all right, we're seeing the light and the end of the light of the tunnel. Up here, where you start to get above that, and they're happy again. You know, not as fearful, is when it's finally coming together and they see that. There might be moments of being fearful when they're waiting on particular items to finish it out, but that trough is in that kind of dead zone where, you know, groundwork,
Paperwork,
like the ground
applications, all the boring.
No, it's even after that. It's being built, but there's nothing that they can do about it, right? They don't have a whole lot of control over it. They're in the very beginning stages of building their project, and that's where they're the most fearful. The challenge that we have is staying in communication with them and finding reasons to, right? A lot of our products do have longer lead times. And so in this moment here is where you can continue to have reasons to go back and be in touch with them, right? And forming that relationship, as Amy just noted. And hey, remember, we have long lead times on this project. So understanding the project timeline is important. Can you help us with that, right? And so it gives you a reason to stay in contact, building value, making you show that you're invested in their project. Like, we want to make sure that this is on budget and on time. So we're trying to do everything that we can to help you. Give us some more information. Like, where's the project at in the timeline? When are they going to need this on site? Okay, if they need it on site, they can then help those contractors that are always slow to order, right? We know they want to wait till the last minute to order everything that they can. But by having these conversations in this trough with the architects, that's when you can build value, and you have the architect support to be like, hey, yes, this stuff needs to be ordered. There are long lead times. What do you need? What do you need approved? What can we get for you? So it adds someone other than you just saying, hey, we need to order, we need to get an order, we need to get an order, right? There's reasons behind it, and it brings some more weight into helping us do that. So really, there isn't necessarily a next best time to start doing these things that he has highlighted here. It's a continuous process throughout the entirety of the project. And so that is where, as Amy said, you build all these relationships. You form them and you start them in the beginning, but where it's going to be a lasting relationship, and they're going to come back to you, and the next time they have a project, they know they're coming right to you, is going to happen in that trough. It's going to happen by doing all these things throughout the project.
When I was building this, my thought was, it's really easy to be a good friend to somebody when everything's going well in both of your lives. It's much more of a heavy lift, also much more important to be with your friend and provide that support and meet up with them when they just lost their job or a big crisis happened. And that's kind of what I think about that trough, right? That Keith and I talk about the hero's journey a lot. This is that part of the hero's journey where they're going through strife and stress and struggle. And this is where you create those lasting, beneficial relationships. So it's there, and again, it's there. The point here is that they can overlap, right? You might be working on two things at the same time. That's fine. And the next thing that you're thinking is, okay, well, yeah, how do I stay involved? Because again, like I said, when I'm in Salesforce, I will see note after note of tried to reach out, no response, texted, no response, got the voicemail, they're on vacation, those sorts of things. So I thought I'd just mention a few things. Maybe pre-spec, a question that you could ask is, from my experience, this is usually the stage where priorities start pulling you in different directions. Are there any interior or material or performance questions I can help with to alleviate stress down the line? Because we know that stress is going to continue to get greater and greater as we get closer to, as Daniel said, delivery and writing the specs and all that kind of stuff. Maybe later on, you could say something like, as the project gets deeper into specification, where do you think the biggest trade-offs are starting to emerge? See if there's anything you can unlock there that you can help them with. And last one, once a project gets specified, this is usually where a lot of moving parts start to show up. Is there anything I can do to help support you so your original intention stays intact that we had talked about earlier? Next slide. I was scrolling through Instagram. So this is a video, but I was scrolling through Instagram and this video popped up and it reminded me of a marketing summit I went to many, many years ago. And this was for nonprofits. And the Colorado Symphony discovered that if they can get their season ticket holders to come to a symphony 3.5 times a year, they are 70% likely to re-up their season tickets or their gifts, their donations. If they do it just 3 times, they're about 30% roughly among those 3 times. It's like 28, 30, 32%. So what they started to do at the Colorado Symphony is they started to track how often you were coming. And if you weren't showing up to the symphony every other month, they had a program that they put in place. And somebody would call you and say, we love that you attended XYZ months ago. We're really excited about this program. We would love to offer you complimentary valet parking. Pull right up to the front. We'll hop in the car. No tip needed. Don't worry about it. We're going to park your car right next to the building, and we'd love for you to enjoy the show. They need to get that person in that second or third time. Again, that same person's falling behind. They would actually have the director or even a soloist for that specific program make a call and say, we would love to have you back. We're hosting a private cocktail hour and you have 4 cocktails on the house. I would love to talk to you about how you felt we're performing this year, something like that. And they would be invited to a private cocktail reception. And so that was from my experience. This was like 15 years ago, and this just popped up on my Instagram. So let's see if this plays.
If you go to a restaurant and have a flawless experience, I mean flawless.
Mm-hmm. Pause real quick for me. One real quick thing, if you're in a public space and don't have headphones in, he does drop the F-bomb twice. So feel free to read the captions if you don't want to play this.
Okay.
The statistical likelihood of you coming back to that restaurant is about 42%. If you do come back and have a second flawless experience, your statistical likelihood of coming back a third time is still under 50%, about 47. But if you come back a third time, the statistical likelihood of a fourth visit is 72%. Where restaurateurs blow it is they market to 1 visit. I market to 3 visits. So here's what happens when you come to our restaurants. We ask you if you've been here before. If you say no, we put a red cocktail napkin down. Everybody else has a white napkin. You got a red napkin. You say, why do I have a red napkin? Well, because you're a new customer. We want to make sure we welcome you. Oh, that feels pretty good. Mm-hmm. Manager must come up, introduce himself. Now, we'll send you a postcard that says you can get a free rib dinner at my restaurant any day of the week. Nobody with you, no restrictions at all. So you come to my restaurant, you put the red napkin down, you give me the card for the free rib dinner, you have your free rib dinner. Other people spend $1,000 on media to get a customer to come to their bar. It cost me $4 in a rib dinner. So at the end of the rib dinner, just as it's ending, the manager comes up to the table and says, hey, how was your ribs? Oh man, they were fucking delicious. He goes, oh, you got to try our chicken. He writes on the back of a business card, $5 off chicken, gives it to you. Now the manager's your buddy. It's handwritten. You come back with the business card for the $5 off chicken, which I'm breaking even on now, so there's no expense on this one. You put the card down on the table. Everybody knows it's your second visit. You get the chicken dinner, all that. At the end of the meal, the manager comes over and says, how was it? He goes, great. You full? Oh, I'm stuffed. You got to come back and try my cheesecake. And he writes it on the back of the card, free piece of cheesecake. I get you back for the third visit. I got a 72% likelihood of another visit. And here's the trick. In media, and I hate to say this on a media platform, but the typical restaurant in a market like New York, if you advertise and then look at how many new customers you get, your acquisition cost can be almost $1,200 for every fucking customer you get. It cost me $4 for a rib dinner, $1 for the postcard, and a free piece of cheesecake. The chicken was a wash. So it cost me about $8 to get a new customer. It cost somebody else over $1,000. That's the way you market a restaurant.
Isn't that like mind blowing?
So I thought that was really interesting. That something I learned 20 years ago by the Colorado Symphony is still mind blowing to people 20 years later in this environment. And really what that says is, what is your process, right? What is your version of a free dinner? Where might you be dropping off in the hero's journey? Do you maybe go a little quiet after the first conversation? Do you wait too long after sending samples? After they go, yeah, I really want to use this in my space. Is it after being specified, right? What are those troughs that you can identify in your own process that you can be the cheesecake? How are you providing constant value to the folks that we get to work with? Last slide. What he was saying is it's a system. And just because there's a system doesn't mean it's not personalized. There was a year and a half that I lived on the road, and my mom and I would have lunch every day over Zoom at 11:30 every other Monday. Right? That didn't make it any more or less special, but we had a booked date every other week. That is a system. And so what is your system? We're not here to tell you what your system is. You might be doing all those things. Amazing. You might be doing none of them. But here are some examples that were shared in the interviews. Same-day follow-ups. What about a 60-day check-in after a quote? What about in the middle of a project? Maybe it's 4.5 months. Share an image of a similar install or an article that you read. Maybe you pop in for those legendary library updates, hoping that they'll be there 90 days after you send an estimate. Maybe you offer a consult 120 days after some sort of like marquee point in that journey. And here's the why. If we do these things, trust builds. We trust that, or the customer trust that they are going to get what they need. Your specs, they become stickier because you are invested in the program. There is an emotional connection and they need you to see it through. You have to do less effort over time. Every time they come back to you, there's less of a lift, right? They always say your best customers are your past customers. It's the same thing here. What happens that we've seen over the 6 years that I've been doing this is architects will start copying and pasting a spec from one building to another. And a spec will show up, a $50,000 show up, a dollar job will show up that you didn't even have to have a single conversation about, that you didn't even know about. That happens quite often with some of the top reps. So what that means is you become the default solution, but it's a solution, right? It's how you're going to solve the acoustics problem. What materials are you going to help them select that align with their space? And ultimately, what products then are going to go in that space to solve that solution. So quick takeaways. Interest, intent, and inspiration wanes, and momentum must be maintained. That's that process. That's that rib dinner, that cheesecake. It's that valet parking. Reps who stay involved are the ones who are staying useful. Think ahead, anticipate friction, reduce uncertainty, and help simplify. And then lastly, your roles developing, kind of maybe the old days of show and tell are slowly going away. And we are now consultants and advisors, and we are many little architects and engineers. And so let's draft all that and create success from that.
Sorry.
Nope. And then just activation after that.
Yeah. So Brock mentioned that we will talk about things kind of in each session. You'll see themes come up, and one of them that I'm going to probably talk about in every single session is consults. What I've found and what I have seen over the course of my time here is that truly useful and successful consults is the best way to stay in the spec. I'll give you, Kristen, we just had a spec and the architect asked us to make markups on her design to see to recommend how we would adjust her design and tell her how we would install it to make it easy to install and to help them reduce costs. So when we go and do that, and granted, it's still got to go through and get quoted and make sure that it's within budget. But if we go and do that and we help them adjust here and adjust there to get it within their budget so they specify us, the odds of them down the road when, costs are always overrun on every project, right? Whether they are or they aren't, the contractors are always saying, we're over budget, we need to cut costs. And so they're going to try and find a cheaper way to do the acoustics. When they go and submit and say, hey, we want to do this for acoustics instead, how likely is that architect to say, yeah, go ahead, just use whatever? Whoever they are going to go with didn't take the time to read their plans, didn't take the time to understand their actual design intent, didn't help them find the best, most cost-effective way to solution this. And so they don't know, like, maybe the product is going to be less expensive, but what is it going to do to the cost of installation? Because are they going to think about that? Is another manufacturer going to do that? So just by doing that, just by having this consult, answering their questions, helping them understand what the limitations are of the product and why making slight adjustments to their design is going to help them save time on installation, save costs on the product, save costs on the installation, is going to make us sticky in the end. When the contractor says, we've got to reduce the cost of these vinyl panels or whatever it may be, like, that architect's gonna be like, no, you can't. Like, we got to have this because otherwise I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know what that end result is going to be. So if you're helping them in that initial phase and helping them design not only the aesthetics and the visuals of it, but how it's going into that space, how it's going to be attached, help them see, like, hey, here's where you can reduce costs and still get your design that you're hoping for that otherwise you're not going to be able to do. They're going to be much more likely to be like, no, you can't value engineer them on the back end. And we've seen it on several occasions where contractors are trying to get us out of the spec and trying to go with something that's a product that's cheaper. And the architect will come back and say, hey, no, you got to find other ways to cut. We've got to keep that into the spec. So again, consultations, I'm probably going to bring them up on every single one of these calls. You're gonna continue to hear about them, but
And I do think we're gaining momentum. I think 2 years ago, our close rate was closer to 10%, and I believe our most recent close rate was 22%. We're actually generating less estimates than we did 2 years ago, but we're closing double. So we're still gaining momentum. And what that kind of means to me is we are starting to get comfortable being that trusted advisor. And through Dan's next, 4 sessions, kind of 4.5 sessions, because I think we're going to do consults again, you're going to continue being able to kind of get comfortable with building that trust and becoming that advisor. And then more of the behavioral stuff will give you the confidence to go out and kind of broach those subjects. So, we still have 78% of the opportunity out there right now. So if we're closing 22% of the opportunities we have, that's still 78% that we can go out there and capture. But I think through these 12 sessions that we're going to do, we're going to continue making progress. We're going to continue to build more estimates and continue to close 22% plus, and really use this as a jumping off point.
so we'll open it up to you, to all of you, for questions.
So again, we had a challenge at the end of Dan's. This is another challenge for you all. I know we're now creating more challenges than anyone has time for. We backlogged some challenges. But so an idea here for you, if you want to challenge yourself before your next follow-up, think of one question, plan it out of how to uncover some friction, some pressure, or some changes that your architect might be going through, not just saying, hey, just checking on the status of your project. Click. So plan it, think about it, and how to uncover it. Get them to illuminate on a friction that they're having. So let's do questions.
Now we'll open it up for questions.
I'll kick it off if people are going to be shy today, guys. And sorry, I had to step out of a meeting. I was about 3 minutes late to this, so I apologize. So Brock, yeah, I'm glad you brought the story brand narrative into this call. And if anybody on the call's never heard of the book, it's called The Story Brand. It's a great book about branding and how to treat the customer as the hero. And that's kind of that trough that you demonstrated is about every story ever told. If somebody starts at a certain point, they go through adversity, a guide comes along, and they lead them to a happy ending. And it's important to note that everything you've been saying today is that the customer is the hero and we're the guide. We're trying to get them from point A to point B successfully. And I just wanted to know, I know you talk to a lot of different people, and you got feedback on what they do and what's effective for them. What would you say, and I think people like lists, what would you say the 3 most important things that your most successful rep is doing?
One, and this is kind of a vague one, but it was the most important key factor is you want to see mode do well. There was like intrinsic personal passion and motivation with everybody. They found their in to the mode brand, and they were personally interested in making it successful. Everyone that I talked to was super passionate about the entire program and all the effort that the Bixlers put into it. Keith, you put into it, and Dalton and Kevin, and they came out here, they saw how hard everyone was working, and they go, that's something that I want to be a part of. Everyone said that in the interview. I think the next one was just that the persistence, which we talked about in the last session of kind of the trust one. We talked about it in this one. Maintaining kind of that persistence and a cadence of communications was really important. And then the last one, getting back out into the field. that that over time, especially because of COVID and traveling in cities is becoming more difficult. Gas is getting more expensive, all of those different things. But there's a sort of kind of magic that happens when you are on site talking to people in person. And they were dedicating time to going out and meeting people in person and popping by a firm that they had never talked to, knocking on the door and introducing themselves led to some amazing opportunities.
So real quick to piggyback on this, those are what Brock found in his interviews. What I will say, again, we see a correlation between the top reps and the reps who are constantly utilizing consults. There is a very strong correlation between being successful in selling the mode, and this is mode specific. Those things I think are just them as a rep in general, right? They don't just sell mode. We understand that. But mode specific, there is definitely a correlation between the reps that get the most estimates, get the most closed deals, and how many consults they're doing compared to their counterparts that aren't getting as many estimates and deals.
Yeah, it's kind of like not the internal, external, but what we see kind of behind the scenes or whatever,
Yeah.
and what representatives are feeling out in the field, and what they feel is making them successful. Yeah, great question.
Good. People like lists. Thank you for I know you talked around a lot of that, but it's nice to hear it in order. And
Yeah.
Dan, I wrote down the consults, obviously a part of that top three.
Yep.
Well, I've got here in Utah, I've obviously been shown the mode. Kevin was out here and I did some presentations with him and learned a lot in asking questions and what are your biggest frustrations and whatnot. Leading off with that really, really helped. But, one of my wins is I cover Montana, which I get up to, twice a year, maybe. But some of these remote areas, I've got these architects and we've done consults with them, Daniels, I think Jacola, if you remember them. So we just shipped a job for them, CPMC, and it's a medical building. But he goes, I just put the first set of baffles up. This is a general. He goes, they look awesome. I love it. And I'm like, that's awesome. So point being is now I got this job and I got 3 more jobs to your point where they just copied and pasted and then like, okay, this is what we want to do. So we want to do the felt baffle beams in a wood look wrapped in felt. And that's it with the cable grippers, and some are on the unistrut. And, I think for me, understanding how it's installed and the different types of installations that you have, or, the hardware, I think that's really important to know.
And Peter, the consult we had with them, they asked a lot of questions about
They did.
that. And in all the information that we provided them, it made it really easy for them to feel comfortable enough speccing a product they never used before, right? And so that's where that spec momentum comes from. So now they've got that, like, we're comfortable with this. I don't want to go through that again. They didn't answer all the questions. Let's keep coming. Now they even have these, so that's more of those. Sorry to cut you off there, Peter.
No, that's fine. No, but it is. It's now it's funny because getting these specs and they're far away, which is great. And it's starting to happen here, but again, having Kevin here really helped me to understand what type of questions to ask and how to lead off.
And that actually brings up an interesting point. We hold ourselves accountable too, and talk about like process. The 2 biggest points of feedback we've had in the last year as far as mode goes is I visit you, I have all this energy, I learned a little bit, and then no one talks to me about it for 6 months, and I lose the momentum, I lose the energy, and I also lose the knowledge, right? Because I'm not exploring different acoustic hardware every single day. And so we've taken accountability for that. And now whenever we do interact with different people, we require ourselves to follow up. And part of that, like I recently challenged Kevin and Anthony recently, because I was receiving feedback from you all that they'll do ride along. And then again, you kind of have this radio silence. And so now it's a part of our entire kind of ride along or program or visiting you all in field to check up 30 days and 90 days afterward just to see how everything's doing. And that means a lot and it matters. And it's making you all more successful. We can see that in the data.
Yeah. The more, what I really learned is, especially with the wood, not a lot of people do wood, but having it as one unit that's edge banded that goes on the wall, that's either a panel or a plank or a baffle, and it's so flexible, and people go, that we had some really nice feedback on that to go, nobody else does this that I know of that does wood like this. Everybody does felt, that's fine. We just add a felt on because everybody else does it, right? But the wood, you can really sell it because it's one unit, one piece. You don't put anything behind the drywall, and it's ready to go. And it's simple and it's light. So
I'm sold. Where do I sign?
So rock and roll. I think the consults and what I started to want to do more of is the consults with the installers.
Yeah.
Because some of these guys just think they can install it, and then I think everything's a little different, and knowing the different methods of installation that helps greatly.
And so we're at 4:01. We'll hang out for a couple minutes. If anybody wants to stay and ask other questions, feel free. But we don't want to go too long over, so we will let you guys go. We appreciate you guys joining. Again, we had a great turnout. We appreciate that, and we want you to keep coming back. And we'll get into some more technical details in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great stuff, guys, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Elsa. See you guys.